Welcome to our new class of Python for mobile application development. In this class, I'm going to be showing you how you'll be able to create a chat app just by using Python. Building a chat app with Python without Firebase requires a backend server to handle messaging and a front end for users to interact. We can achieve this by using Flask for the backend and Kivy for the mobile app front end. So the first thing that you want to do is first off, let's open up PyCharm on our device and let's get started with programming. So obviously there are a couple of specific steps which you basically have to follow up. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a directory. There we go. I'm going to name it chat app. And inside this, I'm going to have a couple of, let's say, follow-ups where I'm going to make sure that each and every one of those have a specific, file and specific Python files. So first thing that I want to do is I'm going to create the server and then I'm going to have the chat app. So I'm going to start off with the specific server. And here I'm going to apply another one, which is going to be the chat app. There we go. So we have two of these files. Now, the first thing that you want to do is you need to upload and install the dependencies. Now, the specific dependency that we are going to need is going to be the Flask and socket IO, which is going to be also followed up by event-let Kivy. So the first thing that you want to do is open up the terminal, as you can see over here. You can also open up a new terminal if you want to. There we go. We have local too. Now over here, I'm going to type in pip install. You can see here, I'm going to type in Flask. Now, not just Flask, I'm also going to need Flask socket IO. Flask socket IO. Then it's going to be event let and then Kivy at the end. If you hit on enter, this is how it should look like. Now, I already have it installed on my device, but if you do not have it installed, it's going to install and download the requirements. But as you can see, it's already showing me requirement is already satisfied. That means I already have it installed onto my device. Now, the next thing that you want to do is to understand why are we using these specific dependencies. Now, if we go off directly to the top, we have Flask, which is basically going to work and define the back end of the API. When we use Flask socket IO, it is for real-time messaging. When we use event-let, we use it to handle WebSocket connections, which is basically going to help us with the database. And then we have Kivy, which is basically used for mobile application. Now, another thing is that you don't have to manually upload this work or upload these projects into mobile servers, because whenever you run this server.py and you use this chatapp.py file to run it, you can use it directly to access the mobile application directly through your PC. So you basically don't have to deploy it again like other softwares or applications that you need to make. Okay, so basically that's how simple it is. Now, let's get into how we can create the backend, or let's say the server. Now, you have to make sure to follow up and put everything just the way I keep it, because if you mess up or if you don't have specific criteria and requirements in specific positions, you might even face a couple of errors. So let's start off by creating our backend, or let's say the server.py. So first off, you want to start off with the from. So here I'm going to type in from Flask, which is basically for the API. I'm going to import Flask, put in comma. Now you're going to define the functions. Now the functions that I want Flask to do is for request and also JSONify. Now JSONify is going to make it interactive. Now, even if we are not going to be using JavaScript, but we're still going to use JSONify directly from Flask. So here I'm going to put in request, comma, JSONify. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to put in from Flask socket IO, I'm going to import socket IO. This is how you want to keep it. And we want to use the send function, so we have to define it over here. Then we're going to import the event let. Now let's define our application, which is going to be the Flask name. Flask, open parentheses, name. Okay, this is how you want to keep it. Now the next thing, I'm going to put in socket IO. So I'm going to put in socket IO. It is going to be equal to socket IO, and then it's going to be the app. So put in the app first. After app, I'm going to put in course. Now after course, I'm going to put in allowed origins. Course allowed origins. Okay, origins, it's going to be equal, double quotation, and then put in an asterisk inside. After this, I'm going to define my users, which is going to be defined like this, equal to the third bracket inside, and keep it empty. Okay, this is how you basically want to keep it. Now, we're going to have specific app root. So first off, put in the @sign, and then I'm going to put in app.root. After app root, open up the parentheses, single quotation, and after single quotation, what you want to do is you want to define in sign up. Now, after sign up, you also need to define the methods. Now, the specific methods that I want to use for this specific task is basically going to be, let's say, post. So secondary bracket, single quotation, and then define in post. So after post, what I want to do is I'm going to put in the definition. So put in the def function and start off with the sign up. So open parentheses, and after that, put in a colon. After the colon, I'm going to put in the data, the username, and the password. So put in data first, which is how it's going to look like. And the data is basically going to be request.json. Request.json. Then we're going to need the username. User name. It's going to be equal data.get, open parentheses, single quotation, and then put in username. Now, after the username that we have applied over here, I'm going to need the password. So there we go. We have the password is equal to data.get, open parentheses, single quotation. Here I'm going to put in password. Okay. So after password, what I'm going to put over here is going to be if not username or not password. So if you don't put in the username and the password, it should show us an error. So here, if not, I'm going to put in username or not password, then put in a colon, move into the next line. Here, I'm going to put in return JSONify. There we go. Inside this parentheses, I'm going to open up the third bracket, double quotation, define in error. After this, put in a colon, and after this, put negative space, double quotation again, and username and password is required. Username and password is required. Okay, this is how you want to put it. Now, after this, you want to put in a comma, and then you have to define the, let's say, the length of the words or the alphabets or number of characters that you can put inside of username and password. So let's say the max number is going to be somewhere around 400 to 300. So let's just keep it 400 for now. Now, another thing that you want to define over here is going to be if username in users. So if username in users, so put in a colon, move into the next line. I'm going to put in return JSONify, then open up, let's say, the parentheses again, let's say the third bracket. That is exactly what you want to use. because we are basically defining our errors, colon, double quotation. Inside, you have to define, let's say, user already exists. User already exists. Okay, so if you use the exact same name and you want to create the same user, or let's say create another user, it's going to show us that error user already exists. Okay, so this is how it should define, and in the same way, it should also have 400 characters max. There we go. So there we go. We are done with the username in user. Now the next thing is going to be the username, which is going to be equal to password, which is going to validate if the username or if the password is correct according to that username. Okay, so here I'm going to put in users. After that, secondary bracket, here I'm going to put in username. After that, it should be equal to password. Okay, here I'm going to put in return JSONify. After that, open up the third bracket. Here, define it with the double quotation. I'm going to define a specific message. After that, colon, double quotation. I'm going to put in sign up is, or I'm going to just put in sign up successful. Okay. Now, after that, I'm going to put in comma 200 at the end, and that should be the return value. Now I'm going to create another app root for our login. So here, define it with the @app.root, open up parentheses, define it with single quotation, / I'm going to put in login value. Here, put in a comma, I'm going to define in a specific methods. There we go. And the method is obviously going to be the same, which is going to be post. Now, after post, I'm going to define our login. Open up the parentheses. After that, a colon at the end. Here, put in the same thing, which is going to be the data. So here, the data is going to be equal to request.json. Here, I'm going to put in the username is going to be equal to data.get, open parentheses, single quotation, username. Then I'm going to put in the password. It's going to be equal to data.get, open parentheses, single quotation, and it's going to be password. In the next line, I'm going to apply the if functions in the same way. So here I'm going to put in if users.get username. Okay, .get, open parentheses. Here I'm going to put in username. After that, it should be double equal to password. Colon, moving to the next line, return JSONify. There we go. Inside JSONify, I'm going to apply a specific message, double quotation over here. Here, I'm going to define it as login successful. There we go. In the next line, I'm going to have another return value, which is also going to be JSONify, but here it should define the specific error. Error. Here I'm going to put in colon, double quotation over here again. I'm going to put in invalid credentials. Now, on each of them, I'm going to apply a specific value. Here, I'm going to put in 200 in this case. Here, I'm going to put in 400 in the same way. Now, after this, I'm going to put in my specific socket IO. Here, @ I'm going to define in socket IO dot on. Now, open up the parentheses, single quotation, define in the message. Now, after the message, you have to define all of these in the same way. Definition. Here, I'm going to put in handle underscore message. Now, after that, open up the parentheses, make sure that it is working properly with a small credential. After this, I'm going to put in print so that it prints out the specific message, F, double quotation. Here I'm going to put in received. Now after this, I'm going to put in a colon, and after that, I'm going to put in the open parentheses, or let's say the third bracket, where it's going to show our specific message. Now, after this message, you will see that the double quotation will close off right over here. Also, the parentheses at the end. Then we're going to have the send button, where it's also going to be working and initiated with the message, which is going to broadcast on a specific server, which is going to be equal to true. Now, after that, I'm going to close off the parentheses, which basically sends server to all the users, whoever is connected to the server. Then at the end, I'm going to put in the if function to make sure that everything is running on loop. Here I'm going to put in name underscore double equal single quotation. I'm going to put in 2 underscore main 2 underscore over here with a colon. After that, I'm going to put in socket IO dot run open parentheses defined in the application, comma, I'm going to put in host, which is going to be equal to single quotation 0, let's say 0.0.0.0. So basically 4 of these, and after that I need a specific port for it to run. Port is going to be equal, let's say I'm going to put in a comma first right over here, and the port should be around 5000, so like HTTP 5000, and you want to debug the whole thing, so put in debug, which is going to be equal to true. So this is how your server should look like, and what you want to do at the end is basically just save this server. Okay, so there we go, we are done with the server.py. Now let's go off into the chat.py. So the first thing that you want to do is you have to start off by importing and getting specific like dependencies. Let's close off the terminal as we're not needing it. So first things first, I'm going to put in from Kivy.app. I'm going to put in import app. From KivyUIX, Kivy.uix.box I'm going to import box layout. From KivyUIX text input, Kivy.uix.text input, I'm going to import my text input over here. Here I'm going to put in from KivyUIX button. I'm going to import button. In the same way, I'm going to get KivyUIX label. Kivy.uix.label. There we go. I'm going to import label. In the next line, here, I'm going to type in from Kivy.clock. Clock, I'm going to import clock. Okay? And the last thing is I'm going to import socket IO. Import socket IO, and I'm going to import request. There we go. So there we go, we have our specific request. Now here, I'm going to have a specific server URL. So type in server underscore URL. It is going to be equal to double quotation, HTTP, then put in a colon, two like forward slashes. Here I'm going to put in a local host, then colon, I'm going to put in 5000 as the port, as we already have it defined over here as this is the port. So there we go, we have 5000 as our port. Now I'm going to create our specific class. Now the class is going to be basically very simple, where we're going to define our chat app. So here I'm going to put in class. I'm going to put in chat app, open parentheses, going to start off with the box layout, moving to the next line. Here I'm going to put in def init. This is how you should put it. Now, after that, you have to make sure that you have the self. But after self, you're going to put in a comma, and then you want to put in 2 asterisks to define in the quarks value. After the quarks value, you have to define the super value inside of the init. Now, inside of this parentheses, it is going to be empty. So here, I'm going to put in init, and instead of quarks or self, I'm going to have orientation and like vertical. Okay. First off, I'm going to have orientation. Now, after orientation, I'm going to put in equal, single quotation. I'm going to put in vertical. After vertical, I'm going to put in comma, and after that, 2 asterisk, and then define in quarks. Okay. So after quarks, here, I'm going to define my socket IO client. So I'm going to use this self.socket. Okay. Self socket is going to be equal to socket IO. Socket IO over here. And after socket IO, I'm going to define my client. After client, open and close off the parentheses, and then define in with the try. Colon over here, I'm going to put in self.socket. After that, I'm going to make sure to connect it. Inside of this specific parentheses, I'm going to define my server URL. So it is going to be very simple. Just type in the server underscore URL. Okay, this is how you should actually keep it. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go off to the next line. I'm going to put in self.socket. After that, I'm going to put in .on. After on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the parentheses, and I'm going to define my specific message. After message, I'm going to put in a comma after the quotation, and I'm going to put in self.receive. Then after that, underscore message. After the message, I'm going to define my accept function. Accept, moving to the next line. Here, I'm going to have an exception, so I can also keep it over here. Accept exception as E. Moving to the next line, I'm going to print out a specific value, F double quotation. Now, after this, I'm going to put in socket connection error. After that, as we have a specific exception, open up the third bracket and define in E. Okay, now let's move on to the next section. So in this next section, first off, I'm going to start off with the sign up login form. Now, another thing that you have to keep in mind is that we're going to start off like first thing from the accept indentation level. So here I'm going to put in self.username. Okay. After username, I'm going to put in the username input value. In the input value, it should be equal to the text input. So equal text input, then open up the parentheses. Here, I'm going to put in hint underscore text. After hint underscore text, you have to put in equal double quotation. I'm going to put in enter username. Okay. Close off the quotation, put in a comma. Here I'm going to put in multi-line. Multi-line is going to be equal to false. Okay. Now, after this one, move on to the next line. Here I'm going to put in the self.password input. Self.password, then underscore input. Now, this input is going to be like equal to the text input. So type in text input, open up the parentheses. Here in the same way, I'm going to have the hint underscore. In the same way, just check this out. Put in hint text. There we go. it should be equal, double quotation. I'm going to put in enter password, put in comma, and then put in the multi-line as false, equal to false. Then after this, you're going to put in equal or comma, and then password is going to be equal to true. So that like whenever we are using password, it should work. Now, if we go off to the next line, now from here, we basically have to add in widgets. So put in self.add.widget. Okay. Now, another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure to copy this. I'm going to paste it on the next line too. So on the first line, widget, I'm going to open up the parentheses, define in my self.username input. In the same way, open up the parentheses, self password input, self.password input. So this is how simple it is. Now, if we go off to the next section, we have to create the buttons. So put in self.signup button, sign up, then underscore btn. This is how you should keep it. Now I'm going to copy this and paste it on the next one. But on the next one, I'm going to have a specific binding. So here I'm going to put in dot bind, but the first one should be just btn. Now it is going to be equal to button, open parentheses, and define in text equal, double quotation, sign up, and after that, put in comma, and after that, I'm going to put in size. Now after that, underscore hint. Now as we're using size hint, you should define the orientation. So here, I'm going to put in underscore y is going to be equal to 1. In the same way, move on to the next section. I'm going to define on click, or let's say on button click or on press. So here on underscore press, it is going to be equal to self sign up. Or you can also put in self sign up. That's it for this line. Okay. So put in on press, it's going to be equal to self dot sign up. This is how you want to keep it. Close off the parentheses, move on to the next line. Here I'm going to add a specific widget. I'm going to put in self.addWidget. This is how you should keep it. You can see as we have the sign up button. So the last line is add widget or self add widget dot add widget underscore widget, open parentheses, define in the self function with one parentheses, self dot login, or let's say sign up button. There we go. So we have the sign up button defined perfectly. Now the next one that we want to create is the login button. So here put in self dot login underscore btn is going to be equal to button, open parentheses, text is going to be equal, double quotation. Here I'm going to put in, let's say, login, comma. I'm going to put in the size underscore hint underscore. I'm going to put in y is going to be equal to, let's say, 5 in this case if you want to, but I'm also going to keep it 1 over here. Here I'm going to put in self dot, let's say, login button dot bind, open parentheses. I'm going to put in on press underscore press. There we go. On press is going to be equal to self dot login. In the next line, I'm going to put in the same thing, self dot add underscore widget. Now in this widget, I'm going to have, let's say, self login button, open parentheses, self dot login, and then button. Now move on to the next section where I'm going to define my chat interface. So type in self dot chat, and then underscore history. So here it is going to be equal to a specific label, open parentheses, defined in as, let's say, size underscore hint underscore y, which is going to be equal to 5 in this case, put in a comma, and after that, I'm going to put in, let's say, text. Text is going to be equal, double quotation, let's say, chat history. Okay, now after this, after history, I'm going to put in a colon and then put in a backward slash and then put in n in this case. This is how you want to keep it. In the next line, I'm going to put in self.addWidget. Inside this add widget, I'm going to put in self.chatHistory. Next line is going to be the message input. So self.msg underscore input. Now inside this message input, it's going to be equal to text input, and open up parentheses, define in size hint underscore y. Now this y is going to be equal to 1. Now after that, you should put in a comma, and here I'm going to put in multi-line is going to be equal to false value, comma, and then put in the hint text, hint underscore text, which is going to be equal to double quotation. I'm going to put in type message. Okay. Now on the next one, I'm going to put in self dot, let's say, add underscore widget, open parentheses. I'm going to put in self dot msg input. Okay. In the next section, I'm going to put in send button, send underscore btn. Now it should be equal to specific buttons. Okay. So send button is going to be equal to button, open parentheses, define in the text equal, double quotation, send. There we go. After send, put in comma. I'm going to put in size hint underscore y is going to be equal to 1. And the next one is going to be send underscore button, which is going to be dot bind, which is going to be equal to, let's say, on press equals self. Okay. So after bind, open up the parentheses. I'm going to put in on press. So as we have on press, it's equal going to be self. After self, you have to put in dot, let's say, send message. There we go. On the next line, I'm going to add a widget. So self dot add underscore widget is going to be equal or open parentheses and defined in the send button. Okay. Now, in the next section, what we want to do is we want to define our signup. This is where you are going to use the JSON file. So here I'm going to put in def signup, open parentheses, define in the self as it is already done. Now you have to put in a specific instance. So move on to the next line. Now you're also going to need username and password for signup, right? So in the same way, define in the username is going to be equal. I'm going to put in password equal. Okay. Now inside this username, put in self username underscore input dot text dot strip. Okay. So something like this, self dot username input dot text dot strip. Okay. This is how you want to keep it. Open and close off the parentheses. In the same way, self dot password input dot text dot strip. Open and close parentheses, and that's it. Now on the last line, I'm going to put in if not username or not password colon return then you are going to define the specific response. Now, the specific response for it is going to be request post. So here I'm going to put in response equal to requests. As you can see, requests dot post, open parentheses, function, open parentheses, third bracket inside of this. And here you have to define in server underscore URL. After that, close off the third bracket, backward slash. Here, you're going to define in the signup. This is it. Now, after this quotation, put a bit of space and define in your JSON file. JSON is going to be equal to another third bracket where you're going to define your username. There we go. And also, the specific username is going to be equal to specifical values. So colon, here I'm going to put in username. And after that, put in comma, double quotation. I'm going to define in password, colon, and you should define in password over here at the end. Now, as you have defined in the password at the end, we're also done with this specific line. And then you're going to define the if function. So if response dot status, there we go, status dot code, or let's say underscore code. Now underscore code is double equal to 200 colon, moving to the next line. Here you are going to define your self update. Self dot update underscore chat underscore history. Okay, so this specific history is going to be inside of a parentheses, double quotation, define in secondary bracket. I'm going to define in the specific system, close off the secondary brackets, put in a colon, move to the next line. Here I'm going to put in sign up successful. Okay. Now, another thing that I want to apply over here is I'm going to say, please log in. Okay, this is how I exactly want it to be. Another thing that I want to show over here is that I'm going to be ending the whole thing at the end. So this is how it should exactly look like. You can also put in a full stop if you want to, because that is basically where the line is ending. Now, in the same way, I'm going to have an else function, which is basically going to define if the signup has failed or if the username already exists. So here I'm going to put in else. After else, colon, move into the next line. As you can see here on else, I'm going to put in self dot update. As you can see, underscore chat underscore history. Here, open up the parentheses and then open double quotation, secondary brackets, system. And after that, I'm going to close off the secondary bracket over here, put in a colon. Here I'm going to say, let's say sign up failed. User might exist. Okay, dot, and that is it. In the same way, I'm going to have another def function. So here I'm going to put in def. Now this def function is basically going to be for our login. So here I'm going to put in login, open parentheses, self, comma, instance. Close off the parentheses, move into the next line. In the same way, I'm going to have my username, password. Inside this username, I'm going to put in self dot username input dot text dot strip. Open up the parentheses and keep it open. Self dot password input dot text dot strip. Open and close off the parentheses, and then you're going to put in the if function. If not username or not password, colon, you're going to define the return value. Here I'm going to put in response equal requests dot host, open parentheses, then put in F, double quotation, third bracket, server underscore URL. After that, forward slash, and define in login. Now, after login, put in a comma and define in the same way JSON. Open up the third bracket, here, double quotation, username, colon, username over here. Now, after this, put in a comma, double quotation, password, colon, password. So that is basically it and how you want to save it. Then you're going to put in the if function. Now, in the if function, you have to put in the response. There we go. We have response.status underscore code. It should be double equal to 200 in this case. Now, one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, Control C, and then I'm going to have this right over here after this 200. So here I'm going to put in a colon, which is going to make it work a bit better. And then we have this self-update. So we also have the same thing, self-update chat history, login successful, and if the login has failed with, let's say, wrong credentials. So here, what I want to do is I'm going to have the self.update underscore chat underscore history. We have the system. We also have login successful right over here as sign up successful. So here I'm going to put in, let's say, login successful. And here I'm going to put in start chatting. Start chatting. Now, else, you can see self.update underscore chat underscore history. I'm going to put in login failed, wrong credentials. So here, just change it. Login failed. I'm going to put in wrong credentials. Okay. So this is how you want to keep it. Now, after that, the last section that we're going to create is basically going to be, let's say, our send message. So here, put in def send underscore message, open parentheses with the self, comma, instance. Next line, put in message is going to be equal to self dot msg, then underscore input, then put in dot text, then put in dot strip. Open and close off the parentheses, and the next line should be the if function message. Now open up with the colon. Here I'm going to put in self dot socket dot emit. Now this emit is going to have the specific message. So put in the message function over here. And after the message, you want to put in comma and then define in the message again. So there we go. Now on the next line, I'm going to put in self dot msg underscore input dot text. Now this text is going to be equal to a clear parentheses, or let's say clear double quotation. Now, another definition function that we are going to create is going to be the receive message. Message. Open up parentheses, self, comma, and then put in, let's say, message. After that, put in a colon. Now here, you want to define in the clock. Clock, SCHE, schedule, once or twice, whatever you prefer, but I'm going to use schedule once. Here I'm going to put in lambda. There we go. After lambda, I'm going to put in DT. Then after DT, I'm going to put in a colon. Here I'm going to put in, let's say, self update chat history. There we go. You can also put in self.update. That's how I mostly keep it. There we go. After history, you have to open up the parentheses again, and define in the specific message that you want to appear up. Now after that, put in a 0. Now on the next line, I'm going to create another definition function. So here we have another def. In this def, I'm going to update my chat history. There we go. Update chat history. Open up parentheses. We have the self, comma, message. After that, put in a colon. I'm going to put in self dot chat underscore history, and then put in dot text. After that, it should be plus or equal to f double quotation backward slash, and then put in n third bracket and define in the specific message. Now the parentheses and the quotation should close. Now the last section that remains is going to be creating the class again, which is going to be the main loop. So here, ChatApp main, open parentheses, define it as app, colon, then put in the def of the build so that it works as a mobile application. Open up parentheses, define in the self. Then you need the return function. So that is basically the chatapp.pk or py. There we go. Now we want to make sure everything loops up. If name is going to be double equal to double quotation main, and after that colon, I'm going to put in chat app main, open parentheses, and after that put in dot run and keep an open parentheses. And that is basically done, and that is how you should basically keep this application. Now you want to save up all of these files, and the first thing that you want to do is you have to make sure that the server is running perfectly first. Because if the server is not working, like the chat app will not work either. So first off, run the server.py. If it doesn't work, you have to make sure to debug this server because not all servers work perfectly. Now, after this has been done, you want to make sure to cut all of these things. There we go. And you have to paste it back again. So let's paste it back again over here. There we go. We have the same thing. Now, as we already debugged it, so let's just stop and rerun it. Now, if it shows you restarting with stats, debugger is active, debugger pin, and we also have the specific site and the port, which is working properly. So we want to close off the debugged file, and then we can go off into the chatapp.py and run this here. One thing you have to keep in mind is always start the server first and then get into the chat app or whatever application you are running. So as we have this file, I want to run this chatapp.py, and you will see that a GUI will appear up on your screen, and you can see that our application is working perfectly. So let's just show you. First off, we have to sign up. Let's say if I put in GHG, and the password is basically going to be 12345. If we try to log in, you'll basically see that login failed, wrong credential, because there is no user that has already signed up with these exact credentials. So first things first, we have to make sure to sign up. Now, when I click on sign up, you can see sign up has been successful. Now, if I change the password, let's say I'm going to type in from 54321. And if I try to log in, it will also show me that login failed, wrong credential. But if I put in the exact password that I used to sign up, which is 12345, and if I click on login, it will show me that login successful, and then you can start off chatting. You can type in whatever you want, and then you can just click on send, and it will send it to the user, and it will be just broadcasted to whoever is using these specific port and this program. So thank you for watching this video up till the very end, and hope you understood about everything in this class. You can see this is also dynamic and can be changed whenever you want to. You can also apply more and more commands if you want to, and more users if you want to. So if you still have any confusion, feel free to ask me anytime. I'm always there to help you out. And one thing that you want to do is make sure not to skip any part of these classes because it can be very complex step by step. So just follow up through the class. And also, I'm going to be attaching all of these files with my project panel, or let's say also with my resource folder. So you can check it out, and you can also try copying and pasting into your IDE and check it out if it works. If you want to implement more, you're also like good to go and try doing it and try applying more functionality and more animations or maybe themes to it and try checking it out and fiddle with this software. So thank you again. And without any further ado, let's move on to our next class of Python used for mobile application development.